rights, including that all people have equal rights to use their own languages and to develop their own folk culture and customs. South African universities, as you know, have been engulfed in campaigns like Rhodes Must Fall and Afrikaans Must Fall that have a direct bearing on the rights of other races. Kealeboga Mase Ramaru from the Rhodes Must Fall campaign now joins us from our Cape Town studio. She also specialises in racism in universities and student politics. A very good morning to you, Kealeboga, and welcome to Newsroom.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
First and foremostly, what is your opinion on race relations in South Africa?
I think South Africa is in a very difficult and very interesting time right now. I think as a country we're at a point where we are forced to deal with many realities that for the longest time we've had to be in denial about, or we chose to be in denial about. And I think right now we're at a point where as South Africans and as people of this country, we have to ask ourselves questions of what does it mean to be black in South Africa? And like you said earlier, what the Constitution says that everyone has the right, to use their own language and to association and to the wealth of this country. But what does it mean for you, a majority of this country, to not have those things and to be at peace with it, and for the wealth of the country to be in the hands of the minority, for basically the privilege of enjoying this country to be in the hands of the minority? So I think as a country we're at a point where we need to be dealing with those issues. We can no longer be in a denialism about it. We have to have these difficult conversations that many of us have been trying to avoid, that we have kind of hidden behind from the Rainbow Nation facade and living together. But that's not the reality for a lot of South Africans who are awarded these rights, but they don't materialize into anything tangible for them. They don't materialize into education or into wealth or into land, or even in the ability to access services on a daily basis.
Now, the report that we just interrogated by the South African Institute for Race Relations indicate that 76% of South Africans feel that race relations have stayed the same or have improved since 1994. What's your take on that?
Well, I mean, I think it's very interesting because, when we say, what does it mean? When we say that the race relations have stayed the same or have improved, who have they improved for, and to what degree have they improved? And we need to also ask the question if those race relations and that research and those statistics they also take into cognizant the people who don't access urban areas, the people who don't have access to or are not able to sit and go through those census or those statistics and be a part of that. So I think it's a bit of a distorted, in my opinion, a very distorted view of race relations in South Africa, and evidently so with the state of our universities. Basically, many of our universities being at the brink of really like a collapse because of the denialism around race relations, of the denialism of the exclusion of a lot of people of color in universities. So I do wonder if all of those things are taken into consideration, and if we can actually, take the report seriously when we see so many things happening that say otherwise around us.
Mm-hmm. Now, the emerging student campaigns, are they not perhaps adding fuel to the fire that we already have in the country, Kealeboga?
Well, I mean, I don't know if it's adding fuel to the fire, but it's the reality of what's happening. We can't say that things shouldn't happen just because we feel like the country is vulnerable. The country is vulnerable because it hasn't been dealing with the issues it needs to be dealing with. And that's why we're at the point that we are at. It's not vulnerable because it's being fueled by students. Students are reacting to the reality of the day that they're living and are sending out a clear message about what they need and what they mean when they say they want to be a part of, universities that include them, that recognizes them as full human beings, and recognize them as for who they are and the people that they bring, not in spaces where they need to be assimilating, you know. And I think it's very unfair and disingenuous to say that students are feeling this when it's the reality of what they're living with.
Now, we've seen that Fees Must Fall and the 2016 no fees increases united students of all races across the board. Why was it perhaps not the case with the Rhodes Must Fall as well as the Afrikaans Must Go? Because it seems that they infringe on other races' fundamental rights.
I don't think that's what it is. You know, for example, a campaign like Afrikaans Must Fall is not a challenge to the, you know, to Afrikaans as a language. You know, it's a challenge to white Afrikaans hegemony in this country, white Afrikaans nationalism, because Afrikaans, it's a challenge to Afrikaans being used as a language of exclusion in many universities, which it is. There are a number of universities that are not accessible to people, where people are failing because they just don't speak Afrikaans, and because they don't fit into that mold that's been created around Afrikaans nationalism. So I think those campaigns are more about inclusivity, and they're more about saying we have as much a right to be here as anyone else, and we have as much a right to learn in languages that we can understand and that can help us in our prosperity. I think campaigns like Rhodes Must Fall cannot be accused of dividing people. It can only, I mean, if people who think that Rhodes Must Fall is divisive, or people that don't want to deal with the reality of this country, the fact that within institutions, Black people or people, racialized bodies in those surroundings are still excluded. They don't feel safe, and basically it's still a numbers game that's going on, and that's what movements like Rhodes Must Fall are challenging, and Afrikaans Must Fall. They're challenging the aspect of exclusion. They're challenging the aspect of victimizing people because they don't fit into certain molds. And I think, I mean, those are important conversations to be had in South Africa at this time. We need to be asking ourselves, what does it mean for universities such as the University of Cape Town in 2016 to not even have one Black professor, one Black female professor? You know, what does it mean for us to be teaching to be taught a Eurocentric curriculum, and for students to be excluded at will, you know, and no active work being put in to make sure that students stay in school and they are helped through the university experience.
So does this all point to transformation or overall change?
I think it points to overall change. You know, Rhodes Must Fall uses the word decolonization, and in my opinion, decolonization supersedes the idea of transformation, because transformation allows us to get into a numbers game, to count how many people we have and say, this is what we're talking about. But we don't even take into cognizance, you know, the fact that if we're bringing people into the university, are we making the space livable for them? Is it comfortable for them? Or are they expected to assimilate for them to find a level of comfort, which they never really find? So I think what Rhodes Must Fall is speaking about is an overall change, is a serious, you know, reckoning with the idea of providing or creating institutions and spaces that are representative of people, where people feel safe and people don't sink into depression. Yes, we've got multiple students committing suicide.
That's where we got to leave it. Kealeboga, thank you so much for your time and joining us in our Cape Town studios. That was Kealeboga Mase Ramaru from the Rhodes Must Fall campaign. She also specializes in racism in universities and student politics. Right, let's now take